Hello, everyone. Today we're going to do something a little different than just talking or just doing a meditation with you. For a close friend, I wanted to share a video of doing a practice that I've done for several years of simply visualizing energy moving up and down some very important energy channels in our body, and the effects of that, the physical and the other sensations and experience that may arise from doing such a practice. I will tell you that this is a personal, kind of individual experience that I have. So if you do this, it may happen very differently. Some people may not feel anything. Other people may feel way more than they're ready for. I think the most important part is to not judge it too much, to not cling too much to the sensations and experiences, and just to keep an open mind, as open as a mind as possible. So we're going to open our energy channels and open our mind. And I'm going to describe a little bit of what we're going to be seeing is typically in one breath, which means, I guess 2 breaths, correcting. In 2 breaths, and 2 inhales and exhales. The first inhale and exhale, I inhale energy coming down through my crown to the top of my head. And there's an energy channel that goes down the front of the face and then down the front of the body, right through the center, following the chakras. And it goes, and once I get to the root chakra down in the crotch, I then visualize energy going into the earth. And oftentimes I will send that energy deep into the earth, not just in the surface, but I will visualize the energy going to the core of the earth. And it may have a more tremendous impact than if we're just focused on the surface. And so once I get to that root chakra and start sending the energy down into the earth, then I begin the exhale. And it kind of releases all this tension and pressure. And oftentimes for myself, the energy just kind of bursts out. It's definitely can be explained similar to an explosion of energy. Just not like not a harmful explosion. It's not necessarily really painful or pleasurable. It's maybe both, maybe neither. It's hard to really say what it is as far as the sensation goes. But again, it's not important to describe it or define it. So once we get to that root chakra, I exhale then. And as long as my exhale goes, I keep releasing that energy through that channel into the earth. And then once I'm finished with that part, we can either bring the energy back up from the core of the earth, or we can simply begin at the root chakra around our crotch. And with our inhale breath, start bringing that energy up through the chakras, up along the spine, which is a very powerful energy pathway, several energy pathways that intertwine, they crisscross around the spine, going upwards. And at each impact, each crossing, each conjunction they make is what we refer to as the chakras, these powerful energy centers. And likely there are also nerve clusters at these areas as well. So if we want to look at it in a more physical, biological way. And there's also endocrine glands, very powerful glands at each of these intersections as well that control various different functions of the body. And so with the inhale breath again, we're going to bring that energy straight up the spine through these energy centers. And at each energy center, I kind of get there, and sometimes I'll either spin the energy or just simply visualize it moving up. But at the same time, besides just a visualization, it's very much a connection with the energy and the energy centers and the energy pathways, the whole energy body as a whole. It's very much a connection of what's happening and just simply being in it, being aware of what's happening at the same time of visualizing what's happening. And so once we get to the crown chakra, usually I will do this within one inhale, however long it takes me. And if you're not able to do this in one inhale, that's fine. If you're not able to send the energy down in one inhale and work through all those blockages in one inhale, that's fine. This is definitely taking years of practice to get to this point. So it's perfectly okay if it takes you more than one breath to do this exercise. As many breaths as it takes, it's okay. But the main goal, main visualization being sending the energy down into the earth through the front of the body and then back up the spine and the back of the head. And then when we get to the crown, the top of the head, that's when my inhale ends and the exhale begins. And again, there's usually somewhat of a kind of explosion, the energy just bursting out. And I will visualize it going in every direction, not just up, not just this way or that way, but literally in every direction, just pouring out of my head. And I will often send this energy up into the planets and the stars, and after that point, it kind of just gets lost in the cosmos. No longer focusing on physical points, but just letting the energy just flow. Because that's what at that point it should be doing. It should have worked through all the blockages, or at least some of them, and will be flowing more powerfully than when we began. So now before I begin, I'm going to let you know that there will be some physical movements. I don't know how much or how intense it's going to be. It varies every time I do this, depending on how many blockages there are, how much resistance there is, how forcibly I'm moving the energy up and down. So because we're doing such intense internal work, and it is affecting our nervous system, which runs on electrical impulses, electrical energy, the body reacts in various ways. It's going to jerk, it's going to do various different movements. And so I just want everyone to be aware of that before I begin, that I'm not having a seizure, because I am fully conscious of what is happening. So there is no health risk. I'm not harming myself in any way. So no matter what it looks like, it's okay. I've been doing this for years, and I'm still alive. So it is okay to do it. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want to tell anyone that they need to go and do this immediately. It needs to be everyone's personal decision, or they need to be at a point in their spiritual path where this is just what needs to happen. And it's something we more surrender to rather than force to happen. But beyond the physical movements and such that you may witness, I urge everyone to also pay attention to the subtle of what they may feel is going on, of what they may just simply be aware of, what else may be happening internally or otherwise. Again, to simply keep an open mind. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to take a few deep breaths just to get into that really deep breath relaxation state. And then again, I'm going to begin bringing the energy down the front of my body into the earth, and then up the back, up the spine, up the back of the head, and through the top of the head, the crown. And then we may or may not talk about what has happened and what's going on afterwards. We'll see when we get there. All right. So we start off with some deep breathing and relaxing the body. And on this next inhale, I'm going to begin. Okay, now with this next inhale, I'm going to bringing up the energy through the root. So I'll pick up and say that's not the typical, I would not say that's the typical experience that will happen to anyone who does this practice. For myself, I'm going to admit that I do have several blockages. And the more blockages there are, the more kind of intense these movements, the physical reactions, and the more difficult it is to do this practice, essentially. There's more resistance. A person whose energy is just flowing perfectly, they possibly may have no movements or much of sensation at all, because the energy is already going along those channels. It's nothing they're just doing in the moment. It's already flowing all along. So they may not experience any sensations, really. It's hard to say. It's very different for each of us, depending on how many blockages we have, how deeply rooted those blockages are in our life, and how powerful our visualizations are, obviously. If our visualization is very weak, then it's going to be very difficult to even perceive, perhaps, the energy channels that we're working with, the energy centers and such. So this is a very different experience for everybody. I'm simply showing what happens often when I do this. This individual does it, but do not misunderstand that that's going to happen to you, that it's going to be this intense or that intense, or you're going to have this movement or that movement. Again, this is taking years of practice to even get to this point. Is definitely been quite a road of progress, doing this over the course of years. I used to do this more so every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and have since very much cut back, deciding to become more aware of these blockages and why they're there, rather than just forcing the energy to open up and go through the channels. Really wanting to understand why the energy is not flowing the way it could be, why it's not free and as powerful as is allowed to be. And so this has brought my awareness to a lot of various different issues, old belief systems, trauma, limited and distorted ways of viewing things, relationships, just all the different aspects of my life, essentially. So I don't do this practice very often anymore, as a full bringing the energy down into the earth and then back up the spine and out. I more so do it kind of as I'm guided to. At this point, I like to tune into my system, and that will often bring the awareness to a certain point somewhere, and from there I'll do various different things. Sometimes just being aware of it, sometimes working through it. So it's always very different. Each day, each moment, very different than the last, very different than the next. But essentially, this is more or less the practice of moving in the energy through these very powerful central channels in our system. There are various different ways of slightly or even drastically changing this practice, depending on what culture or which belief system or mindset the person is coming from. There's just all kinds of different ways to do it. There was one technique that I read in a book a couple years ago that was called weaving the nadis. And essentially these pathways that we're working with, they are referred to as nadis in the Eastern view, Eastern knowledge. That's what they call them, as nadis, energetic pathways. And so this person was guided to weave the nadis, because essentially that's what these two channels in our back are doing. They're called either Ida or Ida and Pingala, and they essentially weave between one another around the spine, working their way up. And every time they crisscross, they form an energy center. And so this person had us even visualizing the weaving, which I did several times, but I also found it a little bit more difficult. Um, Maybe it's something for a more advanced practitioner, because you have to really, it's more than just a visualization. I think you have to be more aware of that subtle energy, to really feel where they're crisscrossing and all the movements they're making, and to be connected and at one with that. So it definitely takes a lot more practice and more visualization than I was willing to put forth. So I tend to like just the central pathway of just kind of going down, straight down, not a weaving motion, but just straight down and straight up. Because there's also a central energy channel in the spine that's when the energy is flowing. It's called the Sushumna, and it goes right in between the Ida and Pingala. It goes just straight up the spine and straight up the back of the head. And so this is a continuous energy pathway. It goes up from the base of the spine all the way up to the top of the head, and then over and down the front of the face, the front of the body, back down to the crotch and around the base of the spine. And it essentially is just a cycle of energy. And then it can go downwards and it can go upwards, but that central cycle of energy is always there too. And there's several, way more pathways than I'm even aware of at this point. So this practice is simply focusing on those couple central pathways, and the ones that particularly go right through our main energy centers. And for me, has had the most impact, I suppose we'll say, of helping me to become more aware of the energy body and what the energy needs when it perhaps gets blocked, or alternately if it's overactive. So the opposite of a block, when too much energy is getting pulled in a certain area, a certain aspect of our life is imbalanced in a more intense way, not a limiting way. So I believe that's all. I hope you all enjoyed this. Hope it was enlightening. This is definitely a little bit more of a personal thing to share, and I am grateful for the opportunity to do so, to be a little bit more open with my practices and some of what I've been going through over the past several years, to even just get to the point where I am now of being more aware, experiencing more peace, and getting more into a state of oneness and flowing with the cosmos. Thank you all for watching. Take care.